Hi, good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Craig Watson. I'm a Senior Sales Executive at Access Pay and I've been here for 5.5 years. In that time, I've worked specifically, I've focused on real estate and charities. And as a hybrid of that, I've dealt with a lot of housing associations. That brings us to today's call. However, today's session is for anyone, really. Anyone that's doing accounts payable or payroll payments, and actually any other payments, in fact. Because the customer we're speaking with today is a UK organisation with UK customers and suppliers. It's a BACS focused project. However, should your project have any other payment types, such as faster payments, CHAPS, cross-border, for example, it's pretty much the same thing, just a different payment type. So I'll tell everyone a little bit more about Access Pay, and then I'll hand over to Denise, who's going to be telling us more about what we've done with Great Places today. So we're a Manchester-based corporate to bank integration partner, and we help organisations get visibility and control of your corporate banking operations effectively. We work with some of the biggest banks and we're trusted by them all to do this. So we help transform payment processes by automating and removing unnecessary manual intervention and improve overall cash visibility by connecting your finance applications to banks and payment schemes such as BACS. So today we're going to speak with Great Places, a UK housing association, and they've been our customer for 3.5 years, but I will hand over to Denise to tell you a little bit more about them. So
Thanks,
yeah,
Craig.
Denise,
Hello.
Introduce yourself and your company and your role.
My name is Denise Campbell. I'm Head of Treasury at Great Places Housing Group. So we are primarily a social housing association. We have 25,000 homes, where our geography is the northwest of England and Yorkshire. Our turnover last year was 166 million. Our fixed assets are 1.4 billion. We're rated by the regulator of social housing as G1, V1, which is the top rating for governance and viability. And we are a Homes England strategic partner in a big way. We were awarded almost £241 million to deliver 4,920 homes. So that's a large amount, large responsibility, and a lot of payments. So we use BACS, we use Access Pay for BACS payments, and that is monthly payroll and an accounts payable, usually a weekly payment run, and then sometimes other ad hoc payments during the week.
Great, thanks for that, Denise. So as a head of Treasury, naturally you kind of oversee banking and payments. So I guess before you came to Access Pay, what challenges were you facing that kind of drove to this project?
So the things that we were facing before we implemented Access Pay in 2019 were that we had specific computers that we needed to use to make BACS payments. And the reason for that was that we work off a Citrix network, and in order to use cards and readers and the software, we needed to use that on standalone PCs or laptops, and those were generally in the office, so that all of us payment approvers had a card and reader and could actually go to the machine or go to the laptop and find the payment and approve it so that it would send. Before it got to someone like me, there would usually be a paperwork sign-off. For example, payroll, it was generally printed and reviewed and then signed off, usually on paper and scanned in and so on. And similarly for the payment run each week, it tended to be, if not printed, at least a PDF, which is like, not literally paper, but also a manual process. And another challenge was all of those things I mentioned, they're not agile and they're not as efficient as they could be. So those were challenges. And particularly when I was so pleased now with COVID-19 and we were all instructed to work from home, I'd already implemented this agile, which we'll come on to later. But had that happened a year before, or had we not changed our BACS, it would have been quite tricky because some of us would actually have still had to go into the office to send the money, payroll and payment runs. So I'm really glad that we did it before COVID. And the final challenge was that where the payment files got saved, some people in the finance team could go in and say they realised that there was an error in the account number. They were able to go in and correct that. But that means that anyone who knew how to could go in and actually change the digits in a payment file, which is not ideal. And so I saw that as a challenge.
Yeah, you definitely did do it at a really good time, because in 2020 we've seen an influx of queries of people who are in that situation who really didn't want to be kind of crossing the COVID rules and going into the office to be able to submit files, something that was in 2020 you shouldn't have to do. So yeah, it's good that you did that just before then. So you touched on a few aspects there, but one was kind of touching on risk. So why was reducing risk such an important factor? So you mentioned the fact that colleagues could innocently change the data, but yeah, tell me more around that.
Absolutely. So reducing risk is, of course, really important to protect our organisation from losing money, whether that be through fraud or error. I also see it as, in my role as head of Treasury, I see it as my duty to have systems in place that protect colleagues from even being able to do any fraud or error, or even be, should there be an investigation, then that person, there could be queries, that person, somebody might end up getting blamed of something that wasn't them, because maybe of lack of audit trail, or just having the ability to go and do it. For me, I'm not comfortable with that for myself, and I wouldn't want any of my colleagues to be in that position either. So I wanted to reduce risk for my colleagues' security and well-being, as well as the obvious, protect the business from losing money.
Great, thank you for going into that in more detail. So I guess you've touched on the 2019 world where you had two PCs and it felt a little bit kind of dated. So now we're in 2022 and a few years have passed and using Access Pay. I guess what are the main benefits that you've felt from this project, or what are the key ones? So you've mentioned not being able to change the details and be accused of kind of doing that if something was to happen. But what were the other key points? Right.
So a really lovely benefit that we now see is that for HR or it's our people directorate, payroll team, basically, they now own the process of approving the payment files, and they do so in Access Pay. So that gives more ownership and control to my colleagues in payroll, and allows them to see errors or bank account details that don't exist. Perhaps new joiners sometimes do give the wrong bank account details. And so it's the people in payroll who are signing off who get to see those first. And then they usually come to me and my colleagues in finance, say, what should we do? It looks like this bank account doesn't exist. And it's better that they see it first, because they are actually the people who deal with colleagues and need to go and get those account details corrected. It also is really good for them to have that sign off, so that, yes, of course we can keep paper records if you wish, but all of the sign off is actually captured in Access Pay. It also is good because people like me in finance don't need to go into spot check payroll files, because the payroll system is owned by HR and not finance. So I no longer have to look at payroll files, because it's somebody in payroll who's doing that first spot check and doing the first level approval in Access Pay. And once I see that they've signed it off and I know they have authority to do that, then the likes of me or my colleagues, we can then comfortably go in and do the second approval and send the money through BACS. So in terms of ownership and working with colleagues, not for colleagues, it's really enhanced what we do around payroll. Secondly, a vast improvement for payment approvers is the use of a digital certificate. So we don't need to use cards and readers anymore, and we don't have to install Gemalto on computers anymore. Instead, we use a HSM, which stands for Hardware Server Module, I think. And it's I don't need the techie speak, I'm an accountant. So it's a digital certificate. So that means that it's a secure certificate set up between Access Pay and the bank, so that when we sign it in Access Pay, there are certain authentications that I have to do when I'm doing a sign off, but that's instead of using a card and reader. So it's all in Access Pay. Now that means I don't need to carry my card with me. And again, working in a Citrix environment, I don't need to use do it outside Citrix. And I don't need to ask my IT tech services IT team to help me like make the backs, cards and readers work inside Citrix. I don't need to do that. It's just so simple that we're using a HSM digital certificate.
Brilliant. Yeah.
I also.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, yeah, I've got quite a lot to say on this, because the other vast improvement, I suppose, is what I mentioned before around the security. Now, sometimes it's awkward because if there is a payment run and it's created and it's been sent from our accounting system over to Access Pay, and they say, oh, there's something wrong, then I can't just delete one line, the file's gone, and it doesn't have any manual intervention. So it goes through a series of folders on networks that we've ensured that nobody from finance has access to them. We shouldn't have access, myself included. And so it can be a little bit more cumbersome, but it's myself and the accounts payable, my colleagues have quickly adapted to working like that. And it's just so important to make sure that when the file leaves the accounting system, that it's signed off and it's ready to go, because we won't be changing it after that. We either pull the whole thing and start again, rewind, but that's okay too. We can do that.
Yeah, all I was going to touch on there, Denise, is we've seen a lot of challenges with Citrix and Gemalto. I don't think the most compatible of two things. So as you mentioned, you have to access a PC outside of that network to even be able to use it. So we just remove all of that. And it's worth noting that, so HSM, once you've got it installed, you never need to talk about it again. But it stands for Hardware Security Module, but the name's a bit deceiving because it's not hardware. We host it, so it's a cloud-based solution. The name just is a bit outdated. So thank you for touching on that. So it's benefited you operationally and from a security perspective. But have those additions helped remove like repetitive tasks and save time through the automation?
Yes, I think so. And I mostly explained it a moment ago. I mean, certainly with payroll, it saves time for the finance team because we aren't going in and spot checking payroll files anymore. And that definitely saves time for myself and my finance colleagues. And because we pass the ownership to the senior people in HR to do that task. So that definitely saves time for finance colleagues. And does it take away repetitive tasks? It does, I suppose, because for the accounts payable team, when they are ready to send the payment run, it is one click. There's no saving here, saving there, and me then having to go in to find where the file is on a folder somewhere. It is instant. So as soon as within I think 1 minute, it leaves the accounting payable account system, and it's there visible to me in Access Pay, so nobody has to do anything. It's been set up when I implemented it. Got my tech services team to make sure that it just writes to the correct place straight away. So it just saves us time with that.
And removing that manual aspect also means you couldn't upload the same file twice by accident or anything like that, because only the one correct file transfers. So there's no chance of that as well.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's great. Yeah, thank you. So I guess we've talked quite a lot about the technical aspects of what we do for Great Places, but I guess from a customer service perspective, how have you found, I guess, the initial discovery, sales process, implementation, and I guess you've been a customer for long enough to know what it's like to be a customer as well.
Sure. So what it's like to be a customer is that I find it very easy to contact service desk and I get a quick response, and whoever I'm dealing with tends to follow that ticket through to the end, and they're quite proactive about coming back to me if there's a delay from my side. Equally, sometimes if we've had to make small changes, I can just do that through the service desk. So I find that quite straightforward. Making some amends to various functionalities or settings. It just isn't a big deal. I just go through service desk usually. And then I have annual reviews as well with you, Craig. So that's when we talk about any additional functionality that you've released and would it be beneficial for Great Places. And so we try and schedule that in for about once a year. And at the minute, your team is now helping me get email notifications set up where I didn't have them before. So that's come out of that conversation.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for touching on that. So I think we've got a question here. It's worth touching on just because it kind of ties in with what we're talking about there. Would you say that Access Pay is able to help you with compliance or audit from that perspective?
It definitely is really good for proving, for example, an internal audit for Treasury payments. We have to prove that the right people are approving the payments. And so just to get an audit report from Access Pay, it shows clearly who's approved them. And it's not records that I've had to keep anywhere separately or on paper or on PDFs or get any signatures like that. So it hasn't taken any time from me. I've just been able to run an audit report from Access Pay and get what I want. I would do something like that. With my online banking website, same thing. It's really straightforward. I think that's
Yeah, thank you. So I guess one thing is quite interesting that a lot of organisations go through is when the organisation changes its structure, and either is by the form of an acquisition or merger, which is quite common in housing associations if you have the pleasure of working with them. So I guess you went through a merger yourselves. What could you tell us more about that and how Access Pay was able to help with that process?
Yes, I can. So we had a merger in April 2020. It was the 1st of April 2020, which was exciting given the COVID 2 weeks before. So that was quite a lot of work. And we'd implemented Access Pay about 8 months before that. So it was actually fine. It was hard work, but it was fine. What I did with Access Pay was I realized that straight away after the 1st of April, I would like all the payments going through Access Pay. Now, the organisation that merged into Great Places, Equity Housing Group, was using a NatWest Bank, whereas Great Places use RBS. So they're actually in the same group, but they're two different banks. So it's two different banks, which is two different digital certificates. It's two different whole IT networks, two different accounting systems, two different payroll systems. And none of those networks were going to be combined within, a few days of the merger. That, of course, took longer. But I did want the payments to be combined straight away. And I knew it was possible. So I worked with Access Pay from February. So straight after speaking to the bank and understanding what needed to happen with the operational banking, then I had a conversation with Access Pay. And what we deduced was that it would be good to mirror the setup that we have, but just do like a mirror image of it. So identical. So we had a digital certificate set up, had to purchase that from NatWest and got that set up. And on the network of the Equity Housing Group, which was merging into Great Places, within that IT network had the relevant folders set up and the same processes, and I had really good tech support there from my colleagues. So we got all that done within a few weeks, and it was a real success because within 2 weeks of the merger, we were sending the payroll and the payment runs from that entity. So the brand new one. I was really pleased with the outcome. It went very smoothly, and I think kudos because it was the 1st of April 2020. So it was definitely eventful, and but it was absolutely fine. It was good. 2 years later, when we've migrated most of the post-merger activities into one group, I was then able to decommission what I had set up. So I got rid of the digital certificate and took away all that side of things. And so then that like reduced the annual fees back. You know, it was very straightforward.
Yeah, great. I guess you're talking about that 1st of April 2020, and I guess from Access Pay's perspective, we operate exactly the same because we're a cloud-based solution for us. So for us to not be able to work remote, it'd be a bit counterproductive. So yeah, we're able to operate as normal then, and hopefully there's none of that happening ever again. But yeah, we're always very flexible. So yeah, I guess for anyone watching, it doesn't matter what systems you've got or what banks you've got, however many you might have on either side, we can work with it. And as Denise mentioned, you can add and remove as you go along, depending on what your business needs. So I think we're coming close to the end of the session. It's been very, very useful. I guess you've obviously mentioned things quite positively, but I guess, would you recommend Access Pay for other businesses?
Yes, I mean, I can recommend the services that we use in Access Pay. So that's fax payments. I haven't yet experienced the other services that you do, of which I know there are plenty, but I can certainly recommend the ones that we use.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. So thank you very much for your time this morning, Denise, and thank you everyone for watching. So this is the end of the session. This will be available on demand. So a link will be available. You can contact someone from Access Pay or myself, of course, and we can share that with you if you would like a copy. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.